fear is where the fun is at, isn't it?
The best of the best always find a way to use fear as a motivator. Your capability emerges out of that. We don't know what we're capable of, we don't know what we're going to like, and we don't know what we're going to be good at unless we go out and give it a shot.
We have what you call a habit of inferiority.
Because your life is never going to be anything more or less than what you make of it. Learning allows you to continue to play. Creativity is how you steer. You want purpose. This is your passion coupled to something outside of yourself. Every successful person I know is running from something just as fast as they're running towards something. Positive self-talk is the ball game. You just get farther, faster, with a lot less fuss.
When it comes to flow state, impossible matters. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more motivation in your life, then do we have the Art of Impossible show for you. Today I'll be talking with Stephen Kotler, one of the world's leading experts on human performance, two-time Pulitzer Prize nominee, the New York Times best-selling author of 9 books, including The Rise of Superman, and the author of a brilliant book for changing your life, The Art of Impossible. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about finding the motivation, grit, and determination you need to achieve your goals. So welcome to the show, take 2, Stephen. Are you ready to shine?
Same answer as last time, Michael. I live in fear, but it's good to see you.
And as I said before, I live in fear too each and every day, even though I'm over 2,000 shows in, nearly 1,500 interviews. But I think actually fear is where the fun is at, isn't it?
I think I study peak human performance, and the best of the best always find a way to use fear as a motivator.
How in the world did you break 65 bones in your legs, and what did it teach you?
Skiing is the short answer, and it taught me when you're in the clouds, don't jump blindly off cliffs.
I like that. My biggest skiing accident was actually in a rainstorm, so that may be apropos. And I was going fast enough in the rainstorm that I got lift under my skis. And as I came down snapping skis, nobody was around to find me. It was a long morning.
Oh, God.
You followed extreme athletes in the 90s. Why and what did you learn?
Great question. So I'm trained as a poet, as a writer, as a journalist, and that's where I started my career. And journalism is this great career where you get to exploit your curiosities. Anything you're into, you can go kind of learn about. And I was obsessed with 2 things at the start of my career: neurobiology, what's going on in the brain. And specifically in the 90s, neurobiology was really cool because we were starting to understand behavior. Yeah. So the mechanisms underneath human behavior. And I was fascinated by this. And I was also obsessed with action sports: surfing, skiing, rock climbing, snowboarding, and the like. In the 1990s, in action sports, it's often spoken about as the great era of impossible, where more impossible feats, things that were never been done and were believed to never going to be done, got done. They were happening so quickly, and so many of them, they weren't just being done, they were being iterated upon. And what really caught my attention is, I was living in Squaw Valley at the time, knew a lot of these people, was running around the mountain with them, was getting drunk with them in the bars, and all the people I knew, the people who were literally reinventing what was possible for our species, most of them came from broken homes, had really rough childhoods, little education, not a whole lot of money. There was a hell of a lot of risk-taking, drug abuse, and alcohol in the community I was in. And normally you put those things together in a community and people go to jail or they die, you don't get the reinvention of possibility of the human species. And that's what I was witnessing. I was like, well, what the hell is going on here? That's where all this started.
And what the hell was going on?
So it's interesting. It took me a while to sort it out. The other thing that's worth kind of mentioning here is I started in action sports, but as you pointed out, I broke a ton of bones, right? So there was a point, late 90s, where I was like, if I don't get out of action sports, I'm going to die. right? So I took this question of what does it take to do the impossible into every domain imaginable. So I studied it in business and in technology and in culture and, take your pick. I looked at this question and it turns out it doesn't matter where you look. Wherever the impossible becomes possible, you see a bunch of stuff, but you predominantly see state of consciousness known to researchers, to scientists as flow. Yeah. You may call flow by a lot of other names, being in the zone, runner's high. If you play basketball, it's being unconscious. There's obviously a lot of spiritual terms. The Holy Ghost is often a flow state experience. I can go on and on and on about with the terminology. Yeah. Technically, flow is an optimal state of consciousness. We feel our best and we perform our best. That doesn't help people very much. More specifically, refers to any of those moments of rapt attention, total absorption. You get so focused on the task at hand, everything else just seems to disappear. Sense of self will get really quiet. It'll diminish. Time will pass strangely. It'll slow down and get that freeze frame effect, maybe in a car crash, or it'll speed up and 5 hours go by like that. And throughout, all aspects of performance, both mental and physical, tend to go through the roof.
When it comes to the flow state, the more afraid we are, the more on edge, the more we're pushing our limits. And I like this graduation, but the more that things funnel down to a singularity of focus.
So what we know is that flow states have triggers, preconditions that lead to more flow. There are 22 that have been discovered. There's probably way more, but we've just found 22 of them. And as you pointed out, flow follows focus. It only shows up when all of our attention is in the right here, the right now, in the current moment. That's what all these triggers do. They drive attention into the present moment. Now, there are a lot of different ones. Risk is a flow trigger. Yeah. But that could be physical risk, could be emotional risk, intellectual risk, spiritual risk. Take your pick. But so is novelty, because it's the same. Risk drives dopamine into our system. Dopamine is a focusing drug. Novelty also produces dopamine. Complexity, I see you, awe is behind you. It's your book. The experience of awe when we encounter overwhelming complexity in the night sky, for example, that complexity, the brain can't process it quickly. It has to pass it from the conscious mind to the subconscious to deal with that amount of information. And it's the front edge of a flow state. It's the same kind of experience. I don't know how we got here. I got lost with awe. What did you ask?
So I was talking about flow state and focus and all of these, some of these 22 pieces.
So we were talking about flow triggers. I'm sorry. So yeah, risk is a flow trigger, but so is novelty, complexity, unpredictability is a flow trigger. Insight can be a flow trigger. But I mean, reading is one of the most common high flow activities on earth, right? You're reading a book and it's a nonfiction book. The ideas really start to cook and, your one idea is leading to the next, leading to the next. That's a low grade micro flow state, but that's a very common flow. And one thing I want to say about flow, just so people listening understand, flow is universal. So one of the reasons why every time I saw the impossible become impossible, I saw flow, it turns out it's not just impossible. It's whenever you see peak performance. Flow is how evolution shaped our brain to perform at its best. So it shows up in all humans and most mammals. There's studies and articles of horse rider flow or horses in flow, dogs in flow. My wife and I run an animal sanctuary, dog sanctuary. We do hospice care and special needs care. And flow, because it has a huge impact on the immune system, is a big part of our healing methodology with the animals.
You just made my day. I didn't know you run an animal sanctuary. I have, taking a nap in the other room, our rescued rooster, who is just over 11 months of age, and he goes for every run with me. I kid you not. He goes everywhere he can.
Rooster?
I run with a rooster in my...
Please, send me a video. I'm dying to see this. My wife
at the end of this, I have a YouTube video of him running in my arms. It's just taken by me yesterday because it's hard to hold the camera and the rooster at the same time, but every single run he goes with me.
If you want to laugh,
yes.
So Google my name, Stephen Kotler, and the 5-dog workout. So my wife and I used to live in New Mexico where we ran Rancho de Chihuahua, which was a sanctuary. In this video, you see the Outside Magazine sent a crew to the sanctuary to see what we do with the dogs to put them into flow. You'll laugh a lot. You'll get a kick out of it.
5-dog?
The 5-dog workout.
I love it. I'm going to have to come up with the one rooster workout. I started doing various activities with him.
That's awesome. Yeah, I wrote a book, my book, Small Furry Prayer, which was the first of my Pulitzer nominations, was a book about the work we did at Rancho de Joao, and it's about animals and flow and a bunch of other stuff that I think you'll actually like. It's one of the more spiritual of my books, and I don't ever use that word because, that's not a term I'm comfortable with, but it is.
And the cool thing, and I'll just take you there for a brief second, then we're going to dive into decoding motivation, is to me, flow state, and animals are a great way to get into flow state, is spiritual. There is a oneness. There is if we look at the neuroscience behind it, a dialing down of the parietal lobe, the I, me, my center of the brain, and there is a connection to oneness, whatever we want to define that as.
Well, so in flow, the reason the sense of self disappears, it's not localized in the parietal. It's usually in the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex. So we see downregulation there. Parietal lobe and flow is an interesting open question still. And oneness is, you probably know, my original mentor in neuroscience was Dr. Andrew Newberg, who
that's where I'm going for this research. Yes.
Right, yeah. Andy's original work was on Buddhists, Tibetan Buddhists and Franciscan nuns, both experiencing. For the nuns, it was unio mystica, which is oneness with Jesus, or Jesus is love. And for the Buddhists, it's cosmic unity, or absolute unitary being, oneness with everything. And that's a very common experience in flow. This is how I met him. Surfers become one with the ocean, right? Or I do a lot of skiing. You become one with the mountain and flow. And I want to know, hey, could the same thing that's happening to meditators be happening to action sport athletes? That's weird. What is that? Right. My whole book, West to Jesus, which is with the first book that started this adventure for me, that was that question of, wow, are you kidding? Our flow states, mystical experiences, it turns out they are sort of. There's more going on, and anyways.
Yeah. We're completely digressing here in some very cool ways. Years ago, my wife and I, when we were living on Maui, we made the program mindfulrunning.org, a way to get into flow state from your running, through your rhythmic breathing, through your rhythmic footsteps. So it all flows.
By the way, I could have used your help. I've run since high school.
Yeah.
And at any given moment, I can go out and give you 5 miles because I just think it's important that, I'd be able to do that.
Yeah.
I've never once. I'm probably one of the world's leading experts on flow and runner's high, and I have never once experienced flow while running. It's the least. I can get it while lifting weights. I can get it doing almost anything else. Running, which is not to say I have a bad time running, but it never produces flow for me.
We will have to talk. We'll leave that for another time, but we will have to talk. Let's go from there. This is cool. This is fun. Let's decode motivation. What's the psychology of drive?
So, first of all, let's start a couple things before that, just to put things in context, because it'll help. When we say peak performance,
yes,
people have all kinds of really fancy, what does it mean? It's not acceptable to me. All peak performance means at a really basic level is getting our biology to work for us rather than against us. Yeah. Now, when you talk about that biology, it's not an endless toolkit. There's certain, when you talk about peak performance, you're really talking about 4 sets of skills. There are motivation skills, there are learning skills, creativity skills, and flow skills. To put it simply, just so people can hold in their head while we talk about different components in it, is think about it this way. In any situation, motivation gets you into the game. Learning allows you to continue to play. Creativity, especially if you're going after the kind of high, hard, impossible goals that I'm interested in, is how you steer, right? You don't quite know where those things are or how to get there, so you need creativity to steer. And flow is, how you turbo boost the whole thing beyond all reasonable expectations, because the list of things that flow amplifies is considerable. So when psychologists say motivation, they don't even, what you and I sort of mean is the energy for action, right? Yes. That's what, right. When psychologists say motivation, they mean the energy for action, but they also mean a bunch of other things. So it's worth sort of just putting it in context. They're talking about extrinsic motivation, things outside yourself that drive behavior, money, sex, fame. Intrinsic motivation, and the big intrinsic motivators are curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. We talked about them. And then they're also talking about grit and goals. That all gets lumped in under motivation. But I think your question is focused on intrinsic motivation.
Yes, absolutely. Because in extrinsic motivation, my boss needs me to do this. That can only last for so long. So I'm talking about intrinsic motivation. Then let's talk about the psychology of drive.
So what the research tells us about drive is interesting and motivation. As you pointed out, while extrinsic motivation, you got to start there, right? What the research says is if you want more motivation in your life, you got to have enough money or whatever to take care of basic safety and security needs, right? If you're wondering where my next meal coming from, how do I feed my family, how do I pay my rent, you too much anxiety in the system, you're going to block performance. You sort of have to solve that first. But once it's solved, it's not that we stop wanting the money, sex, fame stuff. It's that, as you pointed out, you want more performance. Those are not the right tools. Then you want to start reaching for intrinsic drivers. And there are the big five that we talked about, and they're designed by evolution, meaning our brains evolved millions of years ago in a different environment. And in that environment, curiosity is the foundational human motivator. And curiosity is designed to be built into passion. Passion, once the system, the organism, us, has passion, you want purpose. This is your passion coupled to something outside of yourself. Once you have purpose, the system says, okay, now you need autonomy, the freedom to pursue your purpose. Once you have that, it demands mastery, the skills to pursue that purpose well. That's the full. Now, there are other intrinsic motivators. There's lots, right? When coaches talk about like small s spite, bulletin board material, right? The opposing team said our socks smell funny, so we should beat them, right? That's small s spite, right? As a motivator, there's tons of intrinsic motivators. There's a lot that are useful, but the big five. And what's the big deal about intrinsic motivation? Because it gets mystified a lot. And terms like passion and purpose. And I'm not saying they could have spiritual components. That's not, I'm just talking about a performance level, really basic level. First of all, why do we give a shit about any of these intrinsic motivators? Because what you get when you are curious or when you're passionate or when you have purpose, focus for free. Your brain is consumes 25% of your energy at rest. It's 2% of your body mass. It's a huge energy hog. So when you get focused for free, if you're curious about something and you're paying attention to it without having to burn all that energy, that's a huge boon to performance. So the goal is, and what a lot of the motivation section in Art of Impossible sort of focuses on is, how do you turn curiosity into passion and purpose? And then how much autonomy do you need? How do you pursue mastery to maximize all this stuff? And the big point is, if you get all this working right, you just get farther, faster, if you can pardon the alliteration, with a lot less fuss. That's really the point, right? Like, and it's, I mean, and I always say to people, and it's worth, I guess, saying this now, I studied people who've accomplished capital I Impossible, that which has never been done. The book, The Art of Impossible, is really directed at people who are interested in tackling small I impossible, right? That which you think is impossible for yourself. And this could be rising out of poverty, overcoming deep trauma, becoming world-class in anything you do, becoming a successful artist or entrepreneur. My first example, the example I always like to give is I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio in the 70s, and it was a blue-collar steel mill town. And from an early age, like 5 or 6, I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know any writers. I didn't know how you became a writer. It was like I woke up one morning and looked at my parents and went, Mom, Dad, when I grow up, I want to be an elf. Right? For all I knew how to become a writer. No internet back then. There's nobody to ask. It's my own private impossible, meaning there's like no clear path from A, where I'm at, to B, where I want to get to. And statistically, lousy odds of success. That's a small I impossible. But because peak performance is nothing more than getting our biology work for us rather than against us, same biology that goes after capital I impossible is the same biology that goes after small I impossible, is truly, if all this stuff is too much for you and all you're looking for is, dude, I'm just trying to get through Monday. Right? I want a little more contentment, a little more happiness, and a little more productivity. Toolkit's the same. It doesn't matter because it's that basic, I guess.
Thank you. And if we went back to your childhood, your brother blew your mind. You were 9, he was 7. He showed you a magic trick. Your brain fried. You had to learn all of this. And the small I impossible, there's no way something can disappear. There's no way this, there's no way that, was gone, and you were addicted. Curiosity.
I was addicted. My little brother was in magic, and he came home from a friend's house and made a red ball disappear. And I was like, what the just happened? Pardon my language. I was like, and it was what I loved about that moment. I talk about this in the book a little bit, but you have those early childhood experiences that shape you in one way or another. And this is one, because this realization. I was like, well, wait a minute. If that looks like it's the impossible, there's got to be a skill set underneath it. There's a process. Like, he did something. My brother is not magic. So like, what the hell is going on? And it gave me a particular attitude towards seeing things that make no sense. Right? There's not, in my mind, when I got to early action sports, and one example in action sports is surfing is this 1,000-year-old sport. And for, all of that time until 1996, the biggest wave anybody had ever surfed was like 25 feet. And above that was totally impossible. And there were physics papers written about how it was impossible. And suddenly people, my friend Laird Hamilton, who I think we're going to talk about at some point, is towing into 50-foot waves. And it's the craziest thing. It looked at the time, because you'd never seen it, looked like the most incredible magic trick you could possibly imagine. But because I had seen this little red ball disappear and discovered that the impossible, I knew, looking at Laird, okay, it looks like magic, but there's probably going to be a skill set and a set of principles and things. Not that I can go out and surf 50-foot waves, but I could, because my personal impossible that's Laird's impossible. Mine is like a 6-foot wave. 7 feet wave is where I start to get nervous a lot, like really nervous. So like, that's my impossible. So can I take what Laird is doing to surf 50-foot waves and use it to go after my impossible, my 6-foot waves or whatever? Those were the questions I was poking at there.
Thank you. I want to dive into curiosity, but since we're on the topic of Laird, you get sent to write an article on has-been in sports. And there's talk about a setup. You go to meet Laird, and I haven't spoken with Laird. I sat at the same table as Laird, having fish and chips, so to speak, in Maui, and he was this legend sitting at the table there. And at the time, I was really into free diving and things like that. And so I'm watching all of his videos of his underwater workouts and things like that as he's making the impossible possible. But you get there, and it's a journalist setup for you. What happened? What did you learn from it?
So you have to understand that in the 90s, action sport athletes thought it was really funny to try to kill the journalists. They I remember Kristen Allmer has become a dear friend of mine. And I remember a couple of years ago, I made this comment. I was like, yeah, but you guys kept trying to kill us. And when I say try to kill, you have to understand, everybody who I know who covered action and adventure sports in the 90s, every journalist I know got PTSD along the way. I know none of us who didn't get PTSD. Swear to God. So you were put in situations that were so far above your head. But so Laird liked to do activities with journalists, and if he couldn't scare you to death, he would endurance you to death. And so I showed up. We went surfing. Luckily, the waves were pretty small that day. Then he decided we were going to go. He was going to teach me how to ride a jet ski so we could start towing. And I thought that was interesting. I had it when I was a kid. I got on the back of a friend's motorcycle, friend's brother, and he gunned it. And we went screaming off into the woods, and he banked a turn, and I went flying off the motorcycle into a tree and broke some bones on that one, or at least myself up. And afterwards, whenever I'm on the back of a machine and it's going really fast, I panic. I just freak out. So Laird had sort of told me, we were back on the beach before we started. He's like, look, man, the worst thing that I think can happen to you out there is you fall off. You're going to get the wind knocked out of you. And I was like, all right. We get on the back of the bike thing. We start doing 50 miles an hour across the ocean, 40 miles an hour. I don't know how fast jet skis go. And it was terrifying for me. I was having a full scale, panic response. And I don't know if other people are wired this, but when we started talking about fear, I hate the feeling of fear so much that I have to go right at it. Whenever I feel fear, I have to attack the fear because I need to move through it. So we're driving 50 miles across the ocean, and I sort of bang Laird on my shoulder. And you said when I wouldn't get hurt if I fell off. He's like, nah, you probably just get the wind now. No, it's fine. And so I jumped.
Oh, God,
and,
Lord.
Because I had to.
It's like cement glass, man.
I know, but I had to get it out of my system. I had to take care of it. And when he sort of circles the jet ski around to like pull him back in, he's laughing and he looked at me. He's like, "You too, huh?" And everything in that moment changed for me because this dude was the toughest man on the planet. In like everybody's like widely acknowledged toughest guy on the planet. And what he was telling me was he too felt fear and he too hated it and would have to go right at it. And that's another reason he was doing sort of what he was doing. And I had no idea. Like, I was raised in a very macho culture. Men didn't have emotions really well, and they certainly didn't feel fear. So I didn't know that bravery is you feel the fear and do it anyways. I thought to be brave or to be courageous meant you couldn't feel fear at all. And I had spent my whole childhood feeling shame every time I felt fear. And what Laird was like, so the thing he said to me on the beach that made all the difference is he said, "Look, man, I have been afraid for so long. I don't even remember not being afraid. It's the most common emotion in my life. It's what you do with the fear that matters." And I had figured out the same thing. But hearing it from Laird, I was like, oh my God. Like, Superman just told me that, like, he's like, like, what? You know, and this was really early in the peak performance, in my kind of work with peak performance. So it was just an incredibly, it's one of those, maybe it's obvious to everybody else. It was like, I'm the last to know kind of thing, but it was really powerful at the time for me.
Woohoo! Picture you going for it, flying off the back. I can already see him laughing as he's going, "Oh my God."
We've been friends ever since. Like, it's cemented our friendship. He was like, "All right, you're one of us." Okay.
I get it. I really, really get it. So let's talk about a few of these here. And there's a word that comes to mind. It's a little bit different than your word. I think of nexus or coupling. You talk about stacking drivers. And I like looking at challenging people to look at their curiosity, look at what they like to do, and see where that all comes together. And you really dove into this.
Yeah, curiosity biologically. Look, it's a little bit of norepinephrine and a little bit of dopamine. That's what curiosity is. Everybody wants passion. Passion is a lot of dopamine and a lot of norepinephrine. It's literally the same thing turned up. But the thing about passion is oftentimes a single curiosity, there's just not enough energy there for passion. But if you can find the places you pointed out where 3 or 4 or 5 curiosities intersect, you can start learning there and playing there and, having some kind of mini little victories. I'm learning more about this intersection. Oh, I'm learning more. Well, if you can find where 3 or 4 or 5 curiosities intersect and get some of those little wins going over time, that's how you cultivate and build passion. And as you pointed out, you want all of your intrinsic motivators stacked. You want them. We know this all the time about athletes, right? Athletes will stack this side of the equation. They will always get enough carbs, fats, proteins, hydration, sleep at night. You stack the stuff you need to produce maximum physical energy. Mm-hmm. You got to stack the stuff you need to produce maximum psychological energy for the very obvious and simple reason that it's hard here. It's hard for all of us here. And if you're going after hard goals, it's going to get a little harder. So you need all the help you can get.
My guess is there's also a momentum that is built. One thing builds on the next, build on the next. First off, you feel freer to do things, and certainly this gets into autonomy and things like that. But as we start stacking things, systems that lay dormant start to come to life.
I always tell people, 30 years in the high performance game, what have I learned? I've learned a handful of things. The first is everybody's hardwired for peak performance. The second is everybody is capable of far more than they know. And the third is most of that capability most of their potential is invisible. Our potential is invisible, especially to ourselves. And it's invisible for a couple of reasons. One, you only get to find out what you're capable of, and I think you pointed this out earlier on, by pushing on your skills to the utmost again and again and again, right? That's how your capability emerges out of that. But it's even more ridiculous than that when you say human potential is invisible. This is not my work. This Adam Grad's contributed to this. David Epstein and other people have worked on this. But we don't even know if we will like something or be good at it until we try it. And it could be you're a top athlete. You are a former pro athlete. You understand your body. Have you ever played highlight? What highlight is? It's like lacrosse with a little ball.
I have never played it. I've seen it. I've
Okay,
seen it on
so
TV.
that's my
Never
point.
played it.
Okay, that's my point. I could ask you, Michael, do you think you would like highlight? Do you think you'd be good at it? And you could give me an answer, but the research shows even you, former professional athlete who really understands your body, can't answer the question. You have no clue if you're going to like or be good at highlight until you go out and try it and start getting better at it. And then you can make the call. Our potential is so invisible to ourselves. We don't know what we're capable of. We don't know what we're going to like, and we don't know what we're going to be good at unless we go out and give it a shot.
Which means that we get to play. I mean, this begets the question. We are all living far below our potential. So, in fact, what was it? Harvard psychologist William James. The human individual lies usually far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts which he habitually fails to use. We have what you call a habit of inferiority.
It is true for most people. What James is talking about is an experience that people may get, which is talking about the second wind phenomenon, right? Like we all have second winds, but most of us rarely push on our bodies hard enough to ever get to that second wind. But his point is, hey, you got a third wind, you got a fourth wind, you got a fifth wind. You have no idea how many winds you've got back there. And by the way, he's not wrong. That's what some of the best research on grit tells us. For example, if you just want to stick with the second wind phenomenon, is that grit is eminently trainable, really, really, really trainable set of skills. And we have as many wins as we possibly want to get at, basically. I mean, there may be some limits, but they're a lot farther than most of us even can begin to conceive.
Thank you. So let's go to these. You have 6 types of grit. Let's go to type 1, the grit to persevere. And I believe there's a sign above your desk saying, do the hard thing.
There's a sign above my desk that says, do the hard thing. It's sort of what the Navy SEALs mean by embrace the suck. And let me back into it. So when you talk to peak performers about grit, it turns out they train 6 different kinds of grit. Mm-hmm. Now, in the end, these start to come together and they merge, and you don't have to train 6. It's not, there's an onboarding process. It takes a little while to do this stuff, and then it reduces down afterwards. But it starts with perseverance. And good news, really easy to train perseverance. Bad news, you've got to do the perseverance. You know what I mean? You got to persevere. So I always tell people it's really slow and it's really small. If yesterday I went to the gym and I did 3 sets of 10 bench pressing, today I'm going to go in and I'm going to do 2 sets of 10 and 1 set of 11, right? I'm going to push a little harder and push a little harder and push a little harder. The interesting thing about perseverance that I always like to point out to people is it's not just enough to go train the grit skill and give a little extra. And by the way, I'm starting with the physical stuff because the science says if you want to train this stuff, there's cognitive perseverance and all that kind of stuff. But the research is pretty clear. Start with the physical. This is not often the case in everything. And there's a lot of former athletes who are physically chauvinistic. They want to say, oh, you go in through the body first, and these other things aren't valid. There's no science that backs that up, except right here, where it does say, hey, you want more grit, even if it's like cognitive grit, you got to start by training the body. Let's go to the second grit, which is thought control.
Yes.
Everybody, not everybody, I don't want to make an assumption about your listeners, but I would guess that almost all your listeners are familiar with meditation and mindfulness. And these are thought control skills. They're giving you a little space between when a thought arises and when it becomes a feeling. And once it becomes a feeling, there's too much energy in the system to do much about it. You got to like experience the feeling, but you can get in between and you can sort of say, oh, wow, I'm not going to take that super negative thought. I'm going to take something a little more positive, et cetera, et cetera. And in peak performance, positive self-talk it's the ball game, right? The voice. I will always say that, every successful person I know is running from something just as fast as they're running towards something. But personally, it's bad up here. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's bad up here for most of us. But it's bad up here for me. And, this is how you got to get some distance from that voice in your head. Otherwise, there's no way to get at peak performance. And once you start getting that distance, you can move into the next level of grit, which is the grit to be your best when you're at your worst. In the beginning, you started this whole thing, so I'm going to just do it for you, mentioning what the hell does hiking up a mountain have to do with, what was it, grit, or what was you had a...
Scrambling cliffs and practicing speeches. So
there's this famous saying that everybody's probably heard. Navy SEALs say it a lot, but it's actually an ancient Greek saying. We don't rise to the level of the occasion. We sink to the level of our training. And this is has to do with how fear messes with the brain and hinders performance, and all of it is troubling. But as a result, you have to practice, you have to train being at your best when you're at your worst. And one of the examples I give is that when I write a speech, when I do a speech, if it's a new speech, like first time I give a speech on Art of Impossible, which I've already done, so I've done this already. But what I do is I write the speech, I practice it a handful of times, first alone, then with, maybe a friend or two in the room or whatever. And then I'll pick a day when I didn't get enough sleep the night before. I've worked all day and I work really long days. They start early and they go late. And then I'll go to the gym and I'll work out really hard. And then I'll come home and I'll grab my dogs and we'll go hike up a mountain behind my house and I'll give the speech. And if I can give the speech under those conditions, I can give the speech anywhere. And, people joke about and they laugh about that stuff. And sometimes when they hear it, but I'll give you a simple example. So I got the opportunity a couple of years ago to open for President Obama at a business conference. He was speaking in Europe, in Norway, and I was the entertainment before he got on. And right before I'm about to go on stage, the organizer is backstage, and dude is looking really nervous. He's looking really scared, and I'm like, man, calm down. I got this. Like, I got this so much. Like, you guys told me you wanted it to be 37 minutes and 22 seconds, and it is 37 minutes and 22 seconds. Don't worry. And he gets even paler. And I'm like, what's wrong? He's like, they didn't tell you. We need the speech to be 32 minutes and 10 seconds long. And by the way, you're on in 5, 4, 3, 2, like literally, right? So like you've got to cut 5 minutes and whatever, 20 seconds out of his speech, 10 seconds out of his speech in real time. There were 25,000 people in that audience, and there were another 50,000 people watching. It was like it was a rock concert, and but and it was fine. I did a great job, and I did a great job because I trained for it. Right? I trained for absolute disaster. If I give a speech running up a hill with my dogs, I can cut 5 minutes out of a speech in front of 75,000 people in real time. And, I was fine. It was fun.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It makes me think of the most banal, the most simplest thing. When I was training as a competitive swimmer and as an Ironman triathlete, which is you want to perfect your stroke when you're exhausted. That's when it matters most.
Well, that's the other story you mentioned. What is the Indo board, right? You mentioned the Indo board, right, at the opening, and that is so. I discovered in action sports that if you can keep your balance under conditions of absolute exhaustion, as a general rule, you can stay out of the hospital. And I've broken a lot of bones, and I was really tired of breaking bones. And I was like, so I will go to my gym, I'll work out, and then afterwards, I'll jump rope until I'm freaking tired. Or these days I've been rowing, sprint rowing. And then I'll get in an Indo board and I'll queue up. Usually it's like 2 long Eminem songs because his songs are long. And I won't let the Indo board touch the ground over the course of 2 songs. And if it does, I have to start over. I'm training balance under conditions of exhaustion. And since I started doing that regularly, I have not broken nearly as many bones.
Well, it's interesting. We started this, actually, we did 2 starts, so we'll see if this makes it in here. But we started this, and I mentioned that I broke a bunch of ribs a few weeks ago. I broke a bunch of ribs on this really tired ride when I had decided that I didn't believe that my this bicycle I've been using just for a few months, that the limits of adhesion were what my body felt were the limits of adhesion. And I want to know. And the combination of testing the limits of adhesion with exhaustion led to testing the limits of the grit to recover. And we'll get there in a few minutes. But that has to do with that balance. That's exactly when it would have mattered most.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So let's go to type 4, the grit to be at your best when you're at your worst. And that certainly is your jump roping and Indo board. How is this so important? And how does this really, when you said you got this, I bet actually going to speak before Obama, you went into even more of a cooler state.
I was laughing because I remember backstage, this happened a couple times. Backstage, somebody will do something. I've been on stage a very long time. I've been on stage as a magician since I was 11 years old. So I'm very used to it. I don't remember with Obama. I remember like as soon as I walk out and say my first word, right? Like I'm actually calmer than any of it. Like I'm really calm out there. It totally calms me down. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm here. I know what I do. Right, this is my job. I know how to do this. I'm good at this. So I get really, really calm. It's usually the other people backstage who are super freaked out, that are freaking me out. And then when I get away from them, they're like, oh, it's just an audience and I'm on stage. Okay, cool. Let's like I got this. I know this.
Beautiful. So let's go from there. Grit number 5, the grit to train your weaknesses. And this is one that a lot of people avoid.
Yeah, and there's a reason why it's at this point in the sequence of motivation. You want to start with perseverance. You want to then move to thought control, then being your best and you're at your worst. Because the good news about being your best and you're at your worst also is you don't have to. You don't have to train this every time. You know what I mean? Like once a month, once every 2 months. You just want to remind yourself that you have that tool in the toolkit. Training weaknesses, for obvious reasons, suck. They're weaknesses because we're bad at them and we've been avoiding them, right, forever. And the cool news, as you've probably discovered in your work, is that most of our superpowers on the other sides of our kryptonite, right? Fear is a great example. We started this conversation with talking about how peak performers use fear as a compass, and they, go right at things that scare them because often life's greatest rewards are right on the other side. That's a very common example of this. But training your weakness sucks. It's, you know what I mean? So I advise people, and there's no easy way to, you just got to train your weaknesses. You know what I mean? There's no easy way to do it. So I advise people on this one to go really slowly, just a little tiny bit at a time. This is not, I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks and intensely do this and then it'll be all fit, because they're weaknesses for a reason and they're really demotivating and it's a hard thing to get over. So I go bite-sized chunk, just a little bit, right?
What I like about this too is it really gets you outside of your box. And so I can remember I used to be a speed skater, Olympic Training Center trained. I was certainly not the best speed skater as well as a cyclist. And when I was sponsored to do a world record across the country, which didn't happen due to my first near-death experience, I took a ballet class. I took a ballet class as a speed skater with like 5-year-old girls kicking my butt. And I think
Yeah,
it was
so I read about that in more Lessons in the Art of Impossible, but more in my book, The Rise of Superman. That's an example of lateralization. So here, it's going to take a handful of things to explain, but it's a cool bit. So flow states have triggers. We talked about that a little bit earlier. The most important, or one of the most important, what's often called the golden rule of flow, is the challenge skills balance. This is why human capability is emergent, because we pay the most attention to the task at hand, meaning the task at hand has the greatest chance of producing flow. If the challenge of that task slightly exceeds our skill set, slightly, you want to stretch but not snap, right? A little bit of anxiety is good. Focused attention too much overwhelms the system. And there's a sweet spot there. It's called the flow channel, right? When there's a balance between anxiety and boredom. Boredom, not enough stimulation here. I don't give a Anxiety, whoa, way too much. I'm freaked out, right? In between is this sweet spot. The flow channel, we get there by pushing on our skills to the utmost again and again and again. Of course, that means that like one of the foundational skills you need is to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because you're going to be uncomfortable all the time. But every now and again, you find a situation where you're like, holy crap, I can't just beat on this head on. Like that, what is next is too big. And the example I give in Rise of Superman is Ian Walsh. So Ian Walsh is a big wave surfer, and he is the guy who Laird figured out how do you tow into big waves. Ian figured out how to paddle. He noticed something about the waves. He was like, oh, wow, on these giant waves, while the wave itself is moving really slowly or moving really fast, and I can't paddle fast enough to catch it, there are these little pockets inside giant waves where stuff gets vertical, and I can use the free fall drop to accelerate myself into the wave. And he knew, learning how to do this, he was going to take some horrific falls. And the problem was he couldn't hold his breath very long. Even though he was a professional surfer, he had breath holding issues. So he went and became a freehold breath diver, and suddenly learned how to hold his breath for 4.5 minutes. And suddenly big wipeouts were not that scary. They were much more on the challenge skills sweet spot. And he went back to surfing and changed did the impossible. And that's an example of lateralization. When you were trying to learn X and went, no, I'm going to go check out ballet because I need better balance. Right? That's a great example of lateralization as well.
Thank you. And I've got to riff off this. I know we got to start winding things down here, but you talk about in the book, Michael Gervais, a very famous sports psychologist, performist, worked with the Seattle Seahawks. He also works with Felix Baumgartner, who at the time did the Red Bull largest, highest free fall jump out of a hot air balloon, something like 120,000 feet. And Michael Gervais worked with him on just this side of fear with the visualization, meaning of complete and total freak out. You don't want to go to the point of complete lockdown, then you can't visualize anything.
Too much anxiety just blocks everything, right? Norepinephrine and cortisol. A little bit is great, primes learning, drives focus, wonderful, works as a flow trigger. Too much blocks everything. The biggest impact on is creativity, creative problem solving. The more norepinephrine, more anxiety we feel, the more logical and linear we get, because the brain under duress wants simple, tried and true, trusted solutions. So the very thing we both usually need in whatever bad situation we're facing, which is creative problem solving to get us out, is the very thing that fear limits.
How do we make that leap?
Well, how do you lower anxiety is really clear, right? There are what you could refer to as what I call the positive psychology basics. Positive psychology has been around for 30 years, and they've come to certain conclusions. One of them is you need cognitive hygiene. You need mental hygiene. You got to calm yourself down on a regular basis. What are the 3 best ways to calm yourself down according to the science? Gratitude, mindfulness, and exercise. in the research, 5-minute gratitude practice, 11 minutes of mindfulness is enough for emotional regulation, right? 11 minutes of focused meditation, or for anxiety purposes, 20 to 40 minutes of exercise, right? Exercise until it's quiet upstairs, basically. What we tell our clients is, look, normal situations, do one of them a day. I don't care which one. Pick one, do one of those a day. Crisis situations, during COVID, for example, where we're all running hot, do 2 or 3 a day, because otherwise you can't perform at your best. You can't do it. It's too much anxiety in the system. And worse, if you're that anxious to begin with, going into whatever it is, what you do, how do you push your skills to the utmost when you can't get near them because you've got so much anxiety? You're super sensitive, you can't take as much, right? At all. So it really limits the ability to get into flow. And as I pointed out, it limits creativity. It's just a performance killer.
If you don't have time to meditate, meditate twice as long. On that note, we can just keep going and going. I love your work, Stephen. I love it. I love it. I love it. Where can people go to find out more, to find the art of impossible?
So Amazon is your friend here. Amazon really is your friend on the art of impossible. And more about me, StephenKotler.com. If you would like to, if you're interested in flow training or flow science and the work we do at the Flow Research Collective, flowresearchcollective.com. And as a gift for your listeners, the passion stuff we talked about, turning curiosity into passion into purpose. We colloquially have referred to it at the Flow Research Collective as the passion recipe. That's what I call it in the book. We turn it into a living PDF. If you go to passionrecipe.com, there's an interactive PDF and a free little webinar on it. It was just so many people were like, I want to find my passion. I don't know how to do this. That I was just like, you know what, let's just give this away because I'm tired of hearing about it.
Beautiful. So I've got StephenKotler.com. I've got flowresearchcollective.com. I've got passionrecipe.com. I've got amazon.com. Did I miss any there, Stephen?
No, I think you're good. You're solid.
Woohoo! All right. Before I ask the last question, I realized on my phone here, I have the rooster running. Do you want to see it?
Hell yes, man. Hell yes. Bring it to me.
All right. This is not a star recording because I am an expert at running with the rooster. I am far from an expert at, let's see if I can do this here. I'm out for a run. I don't know if you can see that. With Ruru in my arms. We go out once or twice, well, I guess actually 2 to 3 times a day now. Right, Roo? We go out every morning. This morning it was at 4:56 a.m. And then we go out every evening before sunset. The morning one is with a headlamp. And then 2 or 3 days a week, I take him for a fast-ish.
What's a fastest run with you guys? What pace are you running at, by the way?
So here I'm running on the trails at about a 10-minute mile. And fast is probably about 8. I haven't figured out how to go faster with him than that yet.
With a rooster. No, I'm just amazed that he's that calm and you're running that fast. That's so amazing.
What it is here, I'll pause it here. What it is there's a combination of me learning technique, obviously, and for a certain amount of time, he'll let me one-arm him like a football. He's 15 pounds. He's a king rooster. He's as big as it gets. A cuckoo Moran. He's giant. He's 2.5 feet tall. So when he's crowing, he's a big boy. So part of it is getting the right position for running. And then part of it is him getting more comfortable with that movement. And he actually makes, it's going to sound weird, he has specific clucks when he's running that he's happy, that he's comfortable, that this is uncomfortable. And so we've been playing with that edge of getting him a lot of these same things. And now he actually likes it.
Yeah, I'll bet he does. That's amazing. You realize you created a monster. I mean, like, I don't know how long roosters live, but I know it's
20
a while.
Years. 20
yeah, I know it's a
years.
while. Yeah. So one, you've now, because the other thing is this. you do not want a pissed off 2.5 foot tall king rooster, right?
That's
Like
called a missile.
that's called exactly like don't mess with the chickens and the roosters. Like they're ferocious animals if they're not happy.
So he was literally, I was living in Colorado, just outside Aspen. We had just watched or tried to get to a sunset. Jessica and I, my wife and I, are driving down the road in our little shiny yellow Tesla, and a chicken comes running across the road. And I turned to her and I said, if you've ever wondered why a chicken crossed the road, if you let me pull off here, we're about to find out. And somebody had thrown him away at 5 months of age. And so we brought him in, maybe first rooster to take a Tesla ride, certainly up front. Took about 15 minutes to catch him. And he's been with us. He's been with us on RV tour. He's been with us through everything now. Our lives in many ways are dictated by where we can live with said rooster. And we're trying to figure out how we can travel internationally with him. We haven't figured this out yet, but by God, I will. I don't believe in the impossible. Don't believe in no's. I believe in not yets. But this boy wants to ride. He gets pissed off. If I was to go on a run without him and he found out about it, Stephen, I'm in trouble.
That's what I mean. Like you're in trouble. Like for the rest of your life, you've got to carry a rooster when you run. Now, the question I want to know is, can you transition him into a backpack or chest pack?
We are going to start figuring this out today. I've been buying things from Amazon. Nothing's worked out yet. Here's what I got. And I don't like to label people good or bad, but in this case, I said, I'm buying this from the bad people. I bought something on Amazon that is used to take roosters to a rooster fight. And it's a harness that kind of their feet slide through it, and then it has a handle on it to hold the rooster. And I got in some nylon webbing, and I'm going to see if I can web him to my chest. Now, realizing when I pick up my legs, he's 2.5 feet tall. So from his face, if his face is almost at my face level, and I lift my knees, his feet hit my knees. And so we have to work on this sink. He's been comfortable with it so far, but I'm going to see if I can strap him to my chest for running purposes. The back, I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Michael?
Yes?
I only have 2 words for you. Send video. Send video. This is awesome.
Will do and will figure this out, I promise you.
Of course you will. I have complete faith in your ability to solve impossible rooster challenges. You're just the guy for barnyard fowl solutions.
So I never thought I'd be barking up this tree, Stephen.
Awesome. I love it.
All right. Any last words of wisdom? I know we got to let you go.
I don't know if I have any last words of wisdom other than where I started. I was really serious in 30 years of doing this work. The overwhelming lesson is we are all capable of so much more than you know. And now, on a certain level, because we've decoded enough of the neurobiology and the biology and how this works, we're kind of out of excuses. I'm just saying.
It's true. I would just add to it, if not now, then when? For everybody who's watching this who said, well, someday, or if only I could, or I wish I had. No, if not now, then when?
Yeah, I the way I say that is, one of the weirder and truer and simpler realizations I've ever come to, and I think most people come to, is your life is never going to be anything more or less than what you make of it. Right? It's entirely up to you and in your control, in my opinion. So with that, super fun hanging out with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the art of impossible, and find the motivation to do impossible things in your life, like running with a rooster, today, and shine bright. Woohoo! Last 2 words I've got. 140 decibels. Louder than a jet airplane is the crow of a rooster. By 20 decibels.
Seriously?
Yes.
That's rad. I mean, that's an absolute nightmare in your living room, but that's just rad in general.
And
that's cool.
In the living room. There's no way he wouldn't be in the living room. We're working on this.
All right, man.
Lots of love. You guys are the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I just had so much fun with Stephen Kotler. I can't even believe we went to the Rooster. We went to Laird Hamilton. That was a brilliant, brilliant time in leaning into your fear and then finding motivation on the other side. If you wanted to lean into your fear and even more, learn more about why it's coming to you, what you can learn from it, what you can discover, your purpose, your path, and your direction. I'm tongue-tied from this interview. Check out the automatic writing experience, where you can go quiet in the morning, perhaps not quite as early as Stephen or myself, but go quiet. Put pen to paper and learn from spirit, from angels, from your inner wisdom or guides. What's going on in my life? Why am I here? How do I step forward? How do I find the motivation I desire? You can find it certainly at Amazon.com. You can come to automaticwriting.com, where you can get tons of bonuses and get the video-based program as well. And speaking of videos, to find more life-changing videos, click here. Be sure to subscribe below and click on that bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows, YouTube premieres, live events with me every Sunday night. Be sure to give this a big thumbs up and share if you like it. Love you guys so much. Shine bright. Woohoo! Love you guys.